Hello, it is on this day, May 18th, 2022, that I am introducing a new section of my channel, and that section is answering common questions about identity labels and addressing fears around them. And so today's question is there a wrong way to use identity labels? And hand in hand with that question is addressing the fear that many people experience around trying a new label that they don't know if it describes them or not, and having people think they're using it wrong. And so there are a lot of perspectives and takes on these ideas and these questions, and I'm just going to give two perspectives that I believe are important to recognize on these two topics, but there are many more perspectives out there, and you guys, as always, are free to share your opinion and your view down below, and also, as always, are open to correct me and call me out on something I said if you think that I misrepresented something or said something wrong. And so I just also want to put it out there that if you do believe that I said something wrong or am misunderstanding of an identity, then feel free to correct me and I will address it in a separate video. So, alright, with that note, we will dive right into my first one, which is mainly about the fear that people have, which usually is with like misrepresenting a label or a fear of finding out that they don't fit a label and setting it aside, or also a fear that people will tell us that we don't like fit a label. And I felt this fear strongly when I was questioning my gender, and it was one of the reasons actually why I avoided the term transgender and like was scared to even think about it in regards to myself for a long period of time during my questioning. And I was just scared that I didn't fit the perception of transgender, so I couldn't try it. And yeah, I understand this fear. I really felt it for a period of time, but something changed, evidently, for me to get here, and so I think that there's something very important to understand, something that my friends and my amazing therapist helped me realize, and that is that humans aren't omniscient. Like, most of us, we don't just wake out of bed one morning and go, I'm gay. Like, it doesn't happen. Sometimes we do have epiphanies, and those epiphanies can be like really helpful sometimes, but at the same time, finding our identity is really a process, like for almost everybody. And while all the time we can hear people being really confident about their identity and like protruding this like impression that they like always knew, like while there are the people who give that impression, the majority of the LGBTQ plus community all had like a questioning phase or a period of time where they were exploring their identity and trying out labels to see if like how well it fits them. And I would go as far as to say that that's actually pretty common for people to try out multiple labels, especially in the gender spectrum, before they settle on a label or don't settle on a label. That's also perfectly valid. And so, I mean, this is an experience that a large amount of people have. I mean, I myself cycled through 4, 5, maybe 6 labels before I tried out transgender. And another thing to note is that it took a period of time for me to feel comfortable using transgender as a label. It didn't just happen in a week. I still had to stick with it for a while before I started to realize how comfortable it feels to me. And so not only can we just not know what label we are, but also sometimes it takes time with the label to know if it fits or not. And so what I want to say here is that our community is really understanding of this process and of this questioning. So this fear that we have that we will be like considered wrong if we like try a label and then find out it doesn't fit us is actually really misleading. In fact, again, a lot of people experience this, and so it shouldn't be something we worry much about. Another way to think about it is that there aren't like official LGBTQ plus identity police like scouring the internet or walking down the streets, hunting people down to be like, you don't fit your identity. Like, that doesn't happen. And if anybody tries to do that, like, get them out of here. There isn't even, like, a definition for an identity if you think about it that way as well. Like, identities are these labels that describe identities are these abstract ideas. There's no physical description for them. And so you can't fit this idea because every single person defines it differently in their head, and really it's just an overlap of all these people's perceptions to the point that there's a term for it, if that makes sense. And so again, we shouldn't be worried about like fitting this perception when really this is a really loose definition. It's a loose label, and like always, there's a bunch of diversity in this label, and I'm sure that anybody can fit somewhere in here with people who identify with that label. And so we really just shouldn't be afraid to try out new labels, is my opinion. So, I mean, in fact, I would go as far as to encourage trying out labels, especially if you're like very tentative toward that label. I think that that's a way to explore yourself. It's a tool. It's like a method. And if you come back and decide that it's not for you, then it's perfectly okay and valid, and especially you did nothing wrong. Like, you did the right thing, in fact. You explored something to see if it's a path. You were open-minded, and you came back and decided, no, I think I'll stick with what I am, or try a different label. At the same time, if you venture out and find that it does fit you, then congratulations. That's an amazing experience and very satisfying sometimes. And so, again, congratulations for doing that. And at the same time, I would say still be open-minded. Your label can still change, even if you felt it really, really fit you for a while. And so that's another thing to consider. And the last real outcome is that maybe you need more time to try out the label, and that is also perfectly valid and fine. You have all the time in the world. Nobody's timing you. Nobody's like expecting you to like have a deadline. You can take as long as you need, and it's also perfectly fine to never find the label that describes you. Again, these are these abstract definitions that we have, and so they can't really convey a person's experience that well. So if you feel that none of these words we have out there explain what you feel, then that is also fine and valid, and I'm sorry if that's something that can bother you, but it should also be noted that you are free to not have any labels. Alright, so again, in summary, identity is a process, and the majority of our community is really understanding that that is a process and that labels can change. And sometimes we have to try things before we know if they fit or not, and that is also entirely fine, and it's not a wrong thing to do. A small anecdote to kind of explain why I have this perspective. The majority of my life, I thought she/her described me, and not even out of like ignorance of like not considering something else. In fact, when I was a teenager, I actually did consider, does they/them fit me? Does he/him fit me? I looked into neopronouns for a while, actually, and each time I asked those questions of myself, I always came to the conclusion that I think she/her fits me the most. And even when I came to college and I started using any/all pronouns, which was because people would accidentally like think I was something else, and I was fine with it. In fact, I kind of reveled in it. And so I came to college with any/all pronouns, but I still mostly heard she/her because people don't use any/all pronouns correctly. That's a whole nother video. We will address that, but I mostly heard she/her for basically my entire life, and the only times that I really got to question something else was just in my own head without hearing it said out loud. And I was afraid to explore out and like have people say it out loud. I was scared what people would think. But during my gender questioning, my friends and my therapist again strongly encouraged me to take that step out into the unknown and just try it out. And they explained to me that any outcome that would come from trying it out would be valid. Like, none of them would be me doing something wrong. None of them would harm me in any way. It would just be me trying something, seeing if it works, stepping back, and choosing what I am. And so, on a very small scale, I started to introduce myself with he, they pronouns, particularly people I knew who would acknowledge that. And, you know, at first it was weird. I mean, you know, I wasn't used to hearing it. And so I mostly thought I was just going to go back to any all pronouns. But something weird happened, okay? After 2 weeks of trying that out, something just went in my head, and all of a sudden she, her started to sound like uncomfortable. It started to sound off to me, and it didn't necessarily sound wrong, but it sounded weird. And so I stuck with it, and the longer I stuck with it, the more I began to realize how happy I was when I heard people say he, they pronouns regarding me. And I finally got to like dig into these feelings and realize, you know what, I don't want to use she, her pronouns anymore. And so, sorry. And so, if I didn't take that step out of my bias, I probably would have been lost on my identity for much longer. In fact, that was like one of the biggest steps I had to finding my transgender identity. And so sometimes we need to take those steps out onto the bridge and use those to be able to learn and grow. And again, we shouldn't be afraid of doing so. So that is my opinion on having a fear of using a label wrong or people saying you don't fit a label. I think that that's something we shouldn't be afraid of, and something that I would even encourage going out and exploring labels. All right, on my second point, I would like to talk about the question of, is there a wrong way to use labels? And the answer is yes, there is a wrong way to use labels, but I think that if you are being genuine in your experience, and you are actually picking up labels to explore your identity, or to describe your identity, or to try something to see if it fits you, then you cannot use a label wrong. The closest you can get is following stereotypes or misunderstanding the label, and that happens to a lot of us anyway. And what I have to say about that is that if someone comes up to you and respectfully says that they think you are misrepresenting a label, or says that you misdefined a label, then that can be a learning experience for you or them or both of you. And so just be ready to lend an ear and be open-minded about other people talking about the same label, and just having those conversations. I feel that is something that we should be like required to do, is to lend an ear, again, if they're talking respectfully, to other people's experiences as well, to see if we are doing the best we can to talk about these things. And there's always room for improvement in how we talk about labels. So I wanted to convey that opinion I have, because I mean, I identify as bisexual, but I also misdefined bisexual when I first identified as it. And so that some people had to bring that up to me, and again, we had those respectful conversations where I learned I was wrong. And it's a process, and it happens sometimes. So I wanted to address that. But I want to say that those people are not using labels wrong in the way that I mean. When I say that someone's using a label wrong, I mean that they either picked up a label for a very wrong intention, or a intention that can reflect negatively back on us. I will emphasize that in a minute. Or picked up a label while they were transphobic because they want to make a statement or something like that. And that happens sometimes. If you are on this scale that I mentioned, you are intentionally using a label wrong. You know you are using a label wrong. And so in order to use a label wrong, you have to know you are going to. You are either being intentional about it, or you are aware of what you're doing, but you're just ignoring it. that is what I believe. I believe you cannot accidentally end up using labels incorrectly and wrong in a way that reflects negatively back on the community in general or that specific label. So the example here is that some people actually do pick up labels for attention, which I don't understand why, but it happens sometimes. And what that does to us, the rest of us who actually do identify that label genuinely, is it leads us to hear those phrases of like, it's only a phase, or you just haven't met the right person, or you only doing it for the attention. We hear those things because some people out there actually do those things and like spread that opinion out to other people, and sometimes they will say that on their own. But my dad was an example of this, where he met someone who did it for the attention, literally, and that was his impression and something he said to me after I came out, and it can give us really negative feelings and gives us doubt and all these kinds of things. And really, it's just generally one of the biggest pet peeves we have as a community is those doubt phrases that people will tell us. It's just so annoying and, again, negative. And the fact that sometimes that is reflected back on us because people knew that they were picking up a label for the wrong reason, that's doing it wrong. That is how you misuse a label. But really, the idea I want to convey here is that you can't do that by accident. You know you are doing that if you are doing that. And so, is there a wrong way to use a label? Yes. Can you accidentally use a label the wrong way? No, I don't believe so. But you guys are free to say your opinion down below. The last small thing I want to do at the end of this video is address label pressure. Label pressure can be a wrong way to use labels, and it's a really big problem that we have in our community. In fact, our community is built on labels. It's based in labels. Our acronym is like made of labels, and it needs to be said that people can be non-conforming, and people don't have to feel that labels describe their experience, or they don't have to feel like they have to explore each route and then find that none of them fit them. I want to say that, again, these are abstract ideas, and there aren't the words to convey the specific feelings people feel. And to those people who feel non-conforming, you are also valid, and you are also 100% fine without labels. You should not feel pressured to have labels, even though our community makes it feel that way. So I just wanted to take time at the end of this video to address that and say that a wrong way to use labels is to put labels on other people or make other people feel they have to have labels just because you have labels or other people you know have labels. So again, understand that labels are something for us to use to describe ourselves or to describe ourselves to others, but they are not things for us to use to identify other people, and they're not things for us to pressure onto other people. So again, nonconformity exists in our community, and also there are people who just genuinely don't have the words to explain their experience, or they don't want to use the words that are out there to describe what they feel. And so I just wanted to address that at the end of this video. But that was all I had to say. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.